They were handed plastic keys and told the gates of heaven would open. They were told that stepping forward into a battlefield meant honor, bravery, and immediate passage to paradise. Most were younger than 15. Some were barely 12. They left classrooms, villages, and homes, and in their place, the state sent children marching into a war that did not forgive, into minefields that did not care, into chaos that would mark them for life. This is the story of how tens of thousands of Iranian children were pulled into the front lines of the Iran-Iraq war, how they were promised glory, and what truly awaited them when ideals collided with the brutal reality of bullets, explosives, and loss. Once innocence is weaponized, it never returns the same. The Iran-Iraq War began in September 1980 and lasted 8 years, becoming one of the 20th century's longest and bloodiest conflicts. Iran's losses were immediate and devastating. Adult soldiers were exhausted, wounded, or already dead, and the need for fighters became desperate. Into that vacuum stepped the youngest population, boys who could barely comprehend what war demanded, let alone survive it. The Basij, a volunteer force tied to Iran's Revolutionary Guard, opened its doors to children. Age mattered little. Loyalty mattered everything. Boys as young as 12 were recruited, sometimes even younger. Birth certificates were optional. Posters, speeches, and school visits framed the war as a sacred duty, a test of faith. Dying was not just expected, it was celebrated. Religion became the bridge to the battlefield. Commanders spoke of martyrs as heroes who bypassed judgment and went straight to paradise. Boys were given gold-colored plastic keys, meant to unlock heaven's gates if they fell in battle. Some believed it wholeheartedly. Others followed older friends, brothers, or teachers. Refusing to go often meant shame, while going meant pride. Buses rolled out of schools and villages, carrying hundreds of boys who had never fired a gun, never worn a uniform, never known the smell of blood or smoke in battle. Training camps were short, cruel, and often meaningless. Some lasted only days, designed not to teach skill, but to cement belief. Boys memorized chants, prayers, and stories of sacrifice. Weapons training was rushed, rudimentary, or skipped entirely. Uniforms hung on frail frames. Helmets were rare. Boots were often cheap or entirely absent. Supplies were limited, food was scarce, and harsh conditions became a test of devotion. Retreat was forbidden. Standing still meant doubt. Moving forward meant faith. Fear was buried, not confronted. Once on the front lines, children were assigned tasks no human should bear. One of the most horrifying duties was leading advances across minefields. Lines of boys moved forward chanting prayers, stepping on explosives meant to tear them apart, clearing paths for adult soldiers behind them. Artillery and machine guns fired over them. Survival was a lottery of chance. Entire waves were erased in minutes. Historians and veterans confirm that these human wave tactics were routine during major offensives like Operation Ramadan, and later campaigns near Basra. Fields of death stretched for miles, leaving graves that were often nameless, unmarked, forgotten. The psychological cost was immediate and lifelong. Survivors described nights of quiet crying, whispered prayers, and letters home written in case they never returned. Some were wounded and left to die. Medics were overwhelmed. Bodies piled up. When the state media captured smiling faces in public funerals, families understood differently. Some received nothing, some pieces of uniforms, a fragment of what had been their child. The war continued. Loss became routine. Poverty and social class played a crucial role in this tragedy. Many boys came from working class or rural families, vulnerable to propaganda and pressure. The Basij exploited that vulnerability. Religious institutions, schools, and media framed death in battle as honorable. Children were told that martyrdom was not a loss but a shortcut to paradise. Cheap plastic keys represented eternal reward, blurring lines between youthful imagination and exploitation. For many, the fantasy of glory collided catastrophically with reality. Some campaigns included a group known as the 23 People, teenagers aged 13 to 17 captured by Iraqi forces in 1982. Their imprisonment exposed the horrifying truth. Children were being treated as combatants, yet were wholly unprepared for the brutality of war. Some spent years as prisoners of war, trapped in a nightmare that robbed them not only of safety but of their adolescence, education, and innocence. The physical and mental scars lasted long after the war ended. Children returned home older than their years, many carrying metal shards inside their bodies, trauma lodged deep in their minds. Panic attacks, nightmares, social withdrawal, and survivor's guilt became common. Loud noises brought terror. Crowds caused panic. Sleep came in fragments, always haunted by the sound of shells, the screams of friends, and the weight of having survived when so many others had not. Public attention faded. The world moved on, while these children, now men, remained trapped in memory. This was a systemic failure, a moral wound that affected generations. Tens of thousands of children were killed, maimed, or psychologically scarred. What should have been a normal adolescence, schooling, friendships, learning, growing, was replaced by a lesson in fear, sacrifice, and premature mortality. Many survivors recount lifelong guilt for being alive when peers perished. Many cannot build families or careers without being haunted by the past. The scale of the tragedy is staggering. Formal armies rely on trained adults. Iran's pressure to fill its ranks pushed a generation into war unarmed with knowledge, experience, or choice. Historians estimate that tens of thousands of child soldiers never returned. And for those who did, society offered little support, no compensation, and minimal acknowledgement beyond fleeting praise when the war was politically advantageous. Plastic keys and propaganda faded, graves remained. A generation learned that loyalty could be demanded, innocence could be traded, and childhood could be stolen. Even decades later, questions remain. How many children were never accounted for? How many still bear scars, physical or emotional? How many stories remain buried, silenced by shame or forgotten by history? The Iran-Iraq War ended in 1988, but for these children, the fighting never truly ended. Borders shifted, nations claimed victories or losses. But for the boys sent to die, the war left an indelible mark. Their childhoods were spent on minefields, not in classrooms. Their innocence was weaponized and lost forever. Remembering these children is more than history. It is an act of defiance against forgetting. The war may be over, but the lessons are clear. War is not abstract. It is lived in the bodies and minds of those sent too young to understand it. It is counted in lost laughter, silenced songs, and futures that never arrived. Those who survived carry guilt, trauma, and memory, a warning etched in flesh and psyche. If this story matters, help keep it alive. Like this video to ensure these stories reach beyond the pages of textbooks. Subscribe for long-form history that focuses on human experience, not just dates and battles. Share this with someone who believes wars are fought only by soldiers in uniform, because the truth is often far more devastating. History is not just what nations record, it is what children are forced to carry. And remembering them is the only way to honor lives stolen too soon.